Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for October through January. Currently across the Great Basin, we are at PL3 in early October, and we still have several large fires in central Idaho, western Wyoming, and down into northern Utah. Over the last 7 days, heading into early October, conditions have been very dry and warm across the Great Basin, and the last 2 weeks of September, we did see some precipitation in western and northwest Nevada up into Idaho, which was above normal for the time of year. Over the last 30 days as a whole, we have seen warm temperatures across the Great Basin and very dry conditions over the southern half of the Great Basin across Utah, southern Nevada, and into the Arizona Strip. The only precipitation that has been above normal over the last 30 days, and again, most of that occurred in the last 2 weeks, was over northwest Nevada. And again, you can see for the 30 days, it's kind of evened out across Idaho with only spotty areas of near normal precipitation. Since the beginning of the water year, which is the last 12 months since October 1st, 2023 through the end of September 2024, you can see generally drier conditions in many areas of the Great Basin, just some pockets of near normal precipitation across the north and heading into northern Nevada. Since the beginning of April, however, we have again seen very dry conditions almost in all areas. Looking at the drought conditions, current drought conditions here on the left, you can see we are seeing all areas in abnormally dry conditions, some areas of moderate drought up across much of central and eastern Idaho into Wyoming and over southern areas. There is even a pocket of severe drought that has developed over western Wyoming, and this is where we have seen a recent large fire with significant growth. Otherwise, looking at our drought outlook through the end of the year, we are expecting the drought to either persist or intensify over the southern 2/3 of the Great Basin. The only area we may see some improvement might be up in central Idaho when we finally start getting some precipitation as we head into the fall. Otherwise, looking at how our drought impacts our fire season, we've already seen this year. We've had a very active fire season, which we tend to see in years that we don't have significant drought. So we have seen that already, and it is prolonged here through September and will continue into October until we start getting some precipitation. So looking at our fuels conditions, we still have the grasses to deal with heading into the fall over much of southern Idaho into northern Nevada. This is where our fine fuel, both with carryover and new growth, was above normal for the time of year. So we will continue to see throughout the fall the possibility of some lower elevation fires popping up and spreading on windy conditions if we see ignitions. Otherwise, we are continuing to see that large fire activity in our higher elevations of central Idaho into Wyoming and northern Utah. Looking at some of our fuel conditions, our 10-hour fuel moisture, you can see is still very low across all of Nevada into western Utah. And then 100-hour fuel moisture is also critically low. We are seeing 100-hour fuel moisture drop down to below record minimums for the time of year in many areas of the Great Basin. So it's not our lowest of the season since we are into early October, but it is lower than what we would normally see and lower than our record minimums for the time of year. 1,000-hour fuel moistures have also been critically low. Looking at our ERC percentiles, you can see we are still seeing high ERCs over the eastern half of the Great Basin and pockets in the north and across western Wyoming and even the Sierra Front. These ERCs will continue to trend upwards going through the early part of October with continued warm and dry conditions. And looking at some of our 100-hour fuel moistures, you can see these areas here. ERCs are already at record lows for the time of year, 100-hour fuel moistures are already at record lows for the time of year, and they will be heading below those record minimums in really most areas of the Great Basin. So putting everything together, looking at the forecast now for the next 7 days, we are not expecting any precipitation. And really for the first 2 weeks of October, we will probably see very dry conditions. So looking at the 8 to 14-day outlook, you can see those above normal temperatures continuing through the first half of October and those drier conditions. Looking at the forecast through the middle of the month, again, we may see some precipitation start to move into central Idaho towards the middle part of October, but even that is fairly uncertain at the current time, and prior to that, we are expecting those drier conditions. So looking at the next 4-month outlook, you can see still warm temperatures expected all the way through the winter, or at least heading through the early part of the winter for the Great Basin, and precipitation still on the drier side through November, and hopefully we'll start to see that moisture start to pick up in December and January, especially over the northern half of the Great Basin, which certainly desperately needs it. So putting everything together, looking at the outlook For the first half of October, we're still expecting pretty active fires with our large fires over central Idaho, eastern Idaho and Wyoming, and down into northern Utah. So those fires we are currently seeing on the landscape probably will remain for the next couple of weeks and will be picking up in activity at times, especially on windy days, but also just due to the very warm and dry conditions. However, as we get into later October, we should start to see the continued cooling of the temperatures, higher relative humidity, especially at night with those cold temperatures, and hopefully some precipitation, which will knock down our fire potential. So heading through the rest of October and all the way through January, just expecting normal conditions. However, the only caveat there will be in our lower elevation grasses. If we see prolonged dry periods, we could see fires pick up if we get an ignition on windy days, again, just due to that carryover and that higher fine fuel loading. Otherwise, we are expecting our mountain areas to start to wind down as we go through the year with hopefully precipitation and snowfall. That concludes the seasonal outlook for this month. Check back next month for the latest updates.